Yesterday was the first of the really big primaries, and they're really big because there are multiple states holding their primaries on the same day, and this will basically continue through the fall. So, as a summary of the four states that had their primaries yesterday, I'm calling this a primary report on Northwest Indiana, which means that the states that had primaries yesterday were North Carolina, West Virginia, Indiana, and Ohio. And I'm going to tell a story about each one. And actually, I'm going to still tell stories about the Republicans. Because interesting things happened on the Republican side. Basically, it was not a good day for Republicans that are incumbents. And this is interesting because President Trump said he was going to drain the swamp.
If we win on November 8th, we are going to drain the swamp in Washington, D.C.
And the thing is, people in the U.S., particularly Republicans, they still want to drain the swamp. Just because Trump is there, whom they like, doesn't mean the swamp is drained or they just want people to support Trump. They still favor outsiders who are not career politicians. Even if those politicians are super duper in favor of Trump. For example, in North Carolina, Robert Pittenger lost, even though he was the incumbent, and voted with Trump 97% because they went with a man named Mark Harris, who is a pastor. And even though he's a conservative, he is what I would call a compassionate conservative, and he actually says that we should take care of each other, which is very different than the hostile, attacking kind of various forms of bigotry that President Trump puts forward. In West Virginia, you know about Blankenship losing.
I will beat Joe Manchin and ditch Cocaine Mitch for the sake of the kids.
He is, in addition to being, I would call him brain damaged, but I don't want to offend brain damaged people. He called himself Trumpier than Trump. And that did not help him. He finished third. The guy who won, his name is Morrissey. He's the attorney general, so he's a state leader. The guy who came in second, his name is Jenkins, and he's a current congressman. But, again, career politician in the eyes of the electorate, he lost. Also, we see the same pattern happening in Indiana. The man who's won, whose name is Mark Braun, he's a businessman, he's a political outsider, and the two guys that were, these are all Republicans who are running against him, they are members of Congress, conservative members of Congress, super pro-Trump members of Congress, but Republican voters are looking for outsiders. So being super pro-Trump is actually not helping these people. And finally, I want to talk about Ohio, and this is really the most hopeful piece of news from last night. So they had a ballot measure called Issue 1, and Issue 1 was to create more egalitarian, less partisan districts. It was an anti-gerrymandering ballot measure, basically. And it passed with 75%. So it passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. So that means even though Ohio is currently gerrymandered to favor Republicans, Republicans voted in favor of fairness. So I know that we tend to paint Republicans, and they are conservative, they do have different values from us, but we tend to paint them as being the worst of Trump all the time. And I think they have different interpretations about what's wrong with Washington and about corruption and about what our country needs. But they also want fairness. They also want to be served by representatives that are honest. So I found that really